Snow explodes in sheets of white all around them. Tracer fire cuts green and red scars through the valley air, stitching the slope just above the pinned platoon. The sound is a layered nightmare. Heavy machine guns thundering from the high ridges, sharper cracking from rifles, the deeper whump of mortars walking their way in like a closing fist. Contact both sides. Get down, get down. Staff Sergeant Rowe slams his shoulder into a half-buried rock, snow spraying up around his helmet. Rounds chew through the crust inches from his face. Ahead of him, 3 soldiers are spread in a staggered line, half hidden by shattered snow banks and the smoking skeleton of a light truck. The valley is narrow, almost claustrophobic despite its size. Steep walls of rock and ice rear up on either side, ridgelines curling overhead like the edges of a frozen bowl. At midday, the sky is a hard, washed-out blue, the sun reflecting off the snowpack so intensely it hurts to look. Where the hell is our overwatch? Rowe yells, keying his radio. Falcon, this is Bravo Actual. We are decisively engaged in the valley. Request immediate support from Vega Two. Over. Static roars in his ear. For a second, he thinks it's just the chaos around him. Then a reply cuts through, flat, clipped, too calm for his liking. Bravo Actual. Falcon. Negative on Vega 2. She was hit on a ridge an hour ago. Medevac birds took her out of your sector. A pause. You don't have sniper overwatch. Say again, you do not have Vega 2. Rose stares at the snow in front of his face, mind blank. He can't really picture Vega 2, but her reputation hangs over every patrol. The ghost on the ridge. The reason the last convoy came home in one piece. Every briefing ends with the same reassurance. Vega 2 will be watching you from above. Now she's gone. A mortar lands short and left, tossing powder into the air. Another lands just behind them, the blast slamming him forward. Bits of metal patter against his plates. Sir, we're bracketed, someone screams. They're walking it in. Rowe thinks fast, scanning the slope through the limited slice of world his cover allows. The enemy has them in a perfect L-shaped kill zone. One heavy gun chewing at them from his right flank high on the cliff, another nest somewhere left and ahead, firing down the valley. Anything that moves gets cut apart. Falcon, we need artillery, air, something, he barks. We are pinned and taking casualties. His long-range net fractures into garbled noise. Static deepens into a grind, like aluminum foil tearing inside his skull. Comms are jacked. The platoon radio operator yells from behind the gutted vehicle. I'm losing Falcon. Can't hold the link. Might be jamming. A scream echoes up the valley as one of the squad's riflemen takes shrapnel in the thigh, dropping into the snow with a sharp cry, red already blooming through the white. This is it, Rowe thinks. They walked into a prepared kill box, and whoever's up there knows exactly how they'll react. He's about to call for smoke and order a desperate break toward a rocky outcrop when his headset pops with a different voice. Clear, close, riding the local net instead of the long range. Bravo Actual, this is Vega 2. Rowe freezes. The voice is female. Not the brisk, loud confidence he remembers from the sniper's previous check-ins, but something quieter. Measured. There's a soft edge to it, like someone who doesn't speak on the radio much and is choosing every word carefully. He doesn't care. It's someone. Say again, he demands. Bravo Actual, this is Vega 2. The voice repeats, calm as a metronome. You're pinned in a converging field of fire. Machine gun on your right is at your 2 o'clock, 1,100 meters, elevated 50 above. Second gun front left, 10 o'clock, 950, just short of the saddle. Do not move yet. Rowe risks a glance through the gap in his cover. All he sees is rock, bright snow, and flickers of muzzle flash. How she's reading distances through this is beyond him. Vega 2. Falcon says you're off the board. Rowe says, heartbeat pounding in his throat. Evacuated. Who am I talking to? Doesn't matter, the voice replies. On my shot, you'll have a few seconds. Prep smoke and get ready to shift your wounded. Copy. Rowe mutters, not even sure why he trusts it. A stillness drops into him. For a heartbeat, the battle noise recedes. The shouts, the distant mortar tubes, the endless hammering of rounds on stone. He becomes aware of his own breathing, too fast, fog freezing on the inside of his balaclava. Far above, on the razor edge of a cornice, a lone figure lies prone. Snow has formed an uneven lip along the ridge, hanging out over the void like frozen surf. Somewhere inside that blur of white, a human shape blends almost perfectly with the terrain. Ghillie smock frosted over, rifle laid out on a thin pad to keep the metal off the snow. The shooter's face is hidden beneath mesh and cloth, her unit patches taped over. All that moves is her gloved hand cycling the bolt, her chest rising and falling in a deliberate rhythm. She's been listening to the same chaos, feeling it through the vibrations in the ice, reading the recoil of enemy guns through faint tremors, watching puffs of displaced snow downrange, counting seconds between mortar impacts. She settles behind her scope, the world narrowing to a tight circle of magnification that flattens the valley into layers of light and shadow. In her ear, Ro whispers, "We're set. Waiting on your word." She inhales, slow and long, until her lungs are full. The wind over the ridge is a steady push from left to right. She's been tracking it for minutes, watching tiny spindrifts dragging across the crust. "On my shot," she says, her voice steady. 3, 2, 1. The valley holds its breath. The rifle cracks. Down on the right side ridge, the heavy gun barks once more, then instantly stops. One of Ro's men peeks and hoots in disbelief. "You got the gunner." The cheers last half a second. Mortars slam down closer, tighter. One detonates directly on a rock behind them, spraying shards of stone. Another lands ahead, cutting off their escape toward the outcrop. They're adjusting. Ro grits out. "They're reading our position as we speak." It's like the enemy sees through the mountain itself. Every time he thinks about shifting, a fresh burst of fire chews through where he would have been. "Bravo, actual," the calm voice says. "Shift left. See the 3 spruce trees clustered together downslope." Ro looks. There, 3 sparse trees hunched together like conspirators, half buried, barely noticeable in the vast white. Yeah. 20 meters beyond them, there's a low stone wall under the snow. Old terrace. Mortars can't see into it from their current angle, and a left side gun will have to expose to hit you. On my next shot, you pop smoke and bound in 2 teams. Move the worst of your wounded first. How do you even? Trust me, she says. 3 trees, low wall. It's there. Another soldier, PFC Tran, is lying nearby with a bandaged arm and a pale face. He wheezes into his mic, voice tight with pain. "Sergeant," that voice that sounds like Vega Two, but I don't know, slower. Like she's thinking each word before she says it. "Not now, Tran." Ro counts his grenades, slaps his team leader on the shoulder, and lifts his head just enough to see the faint silhouettes of those 3 trees. "All call signs, prep to move on Vega's mark," he orders. "Smoke on her shot. We're going left." Up on the ridge, the sniper works the bolt, feeding a new round into the chamber. This one is heavier, its recoil line different. It's a specialized load she swore she'd only use if there were no other choice. "Bravo, actual," she says quietly. "I'm going to give you 60 seconds of chaos. That's all I can guarantee. Make them count." She shifts her aim away from the obvious flashes of machine guns and mortars and instead traces an invisible line across the valley toward a knot of terrain that looks, to most eyes, like just another seam of rock. But she's seen the way the mortars tighten together, the pattern in their impacts. She's caught glimpses of a strange shimmer through the snow squall earlier, heard the way the platoon's long-range comms broke all at once. Somewhere in that seam, hidden under snow and canvas, lies the heart of this kill box. She adjusts for range, for angle, for the 1,000 tiny variables her mind is running in the background. The world narrows again. Layers of snow become shapes. Shadows become edges. A barely perceptible bulge in the ridge resolves into a man crouched over an insulated case. Her finger settles on the trigger. The story holds there, a heartbeat stretched thin, a single shot away from breaking the geometry of the valley or shattering what little hope they have left. She exhales halfway and starts to press. 6 hours earlier, the mountains are quiet. The same valley lies under a pale winter sun. The air so still that breath floats straight up before fading into nothing. The snow looks untouched, its delicate surface hiding all the violence it will witness before the day is done. Inside the forward operating base dug into a sheltered bowl below tree line, life is all routine friction and clatter. The hiss of stoves, the thunk of ammo crates, the rasp of boots on temporary flooring. A generator hums beneath it all, vibrating the mess tent's thin walls. In the armory tent, a rifle rests on a padded table, barrel disassembled, bolt laid aside. Around it, cleaning rods and brushes are arranged with almost surgical precision. Nova, we're stepping off in 90, a squad leader calls from the entrance. You romancing that rifle, or actually maintaining it? The woman behind the table looks up. Nova's face is open and easy, dark hair braided tight and tucked under a beanie. She grins without pausing her motions. Little of both, she says. You want me to cover your convoy, or you want your pretty face open to the elements? He snorts and leaves, muttering something about prima donna snipers. In the background, leaning over a second rifle, another woman works in near silence. Mara's movements are smaller, tighter, as if she's always mindful of how much space she takes up. Her hair is braided the same way as her sister's, but her expression is different. Less show, more watchfulness. Her name tape marks her as logistics, but the rifle in front of her is no training toy. It's a backup built to the same spec as Nova's. Long barrel, sturdy optic, everything worn in but carefully maintained. Unlike Nova, she doesn't banter with the squad leader. He glances at her and smirks. Quartermaster, you get lost on your way to inventory spreadsheets, he asks. Those things are supposed to be issued to people who use them outside the wire. Nova's head snaps up. She qualifies, she says mildly. Passed the same marksmanship course I did. Better win calls, too. Sure, he says. We're all snipers on paper. Until stuff starts coming back at you. He disappears before Nova can reply. Mara keeps her eyes on the bolt she's inspecting, jaw tight. The comment isn't new. It's the 100th variation on the same theme. She's good, but she's not her sister. Good enough for the occasional range day, for backup duty, but not the one people imagine when they picture a guardian on a ridge. Nova leans over and bumps her shoulder. Hey, she says. You know he's just flapping his gums because he's scared of the mountains. I know, Mara says. And you know if I go down, you're the first one they'll drag to a rifle. Mara's fingers pause for half a second on the metal. The idea makes her stomach tighten, not because she doubts her capabilities, but because of the memory it triggers. A different mission, another valley, a moment when she was in position and did nothing. Nova watches her, eyes softening. Don't make that face, she says. We talked about this. You froze once. It happens. People died, Mara says, voice low. People always die. What matters is what you do next time. Nova straightens, snapping her rifle back together with practiced ease. And we're not tempting fate, right? You're not on Overwatch today. You're with the convoy, doing your logistics wizardry. I'll be on the ridge where I belong. Mara forces a small smile. In the briefing tent, the commander stands in front of a projected map, its surface interrupted only by the steam of soldiers' breath. The mountains are laid out in contour lines and shaded relief. One valley is highlighted in red. Mission's simple on paper, he says. We're escorting a mobile intel package and associated sensors up to this ridge here. He taps a point above the valley. Once installed, they'll give us early warning on cross-border movements. Game changer for this sector. On the map, the convoy's route snakes through the valley like a vein. He gestures to a stack of photos clipped to one side. Grainy shots of unmanned aircraft hovering at the edge of their area, a few blurry silhouettes in white parkas on distant slopes. We've had probing attacks the last 2 weeks, he continues. Nothing big. Hit and run small arms, some indirect. Intermittent drone sightings. Either they're testing us, or they're gearing up for something heavier. A weather officer raises a hand. Front's moving faster than predicted, she says. We'll have clear sky through midday, but by late afternoon visibility will drop. Extraction window gets narrow after 1,500 hours. So we don't be late, the commander says. Overwatch element led by Vega Two will occupy here. He taps a mid-level ridge line and cover the convoy as they move through the valley. Long-range net will stay tied in a falcon the whole time. Any questions? Mara glances across the tent at Nova, who's lounging in her camp chair like this is all routine. Their eyes meet briefly. Nova raises her eyebrows, a theatrical little watch this expression. In a rare moment alone outside the briefing, the twins stand just beyond the wire, the mountains rising ahead of them. Their breath plumes faintly in the cold. "You really okay with staying groundside?" Nova asks. Mara shrugs. "Someone's got to make sure your ammo makes it to the fight. Because heaven forbid I carry my own," Nova says, grinning. Then her face softens. "Hey, about back then." "Don't," Mara cuts in. Nova watches her a moment longer. "Fine, I'll just say this. Next time you're in a position to take the shot, you take it. You don't wait for perfect. You don't wait for someone else's permission. You know the angles better than half the people they keep putting behind glass." Mara looks away, up toward the peaks, where the wind is already combing the ridges. Somewhere up there is the valley on the map, the one that looks harmless from this distance. On the range, just outside the wire and framed by the hard blue sky, Mara lies prone behind a backup rifle. Targets stand out as dark smudges against snowbanks at 6, 7, 800 meters. The air is thin, the wind slipping along the valley like a slow river. She cycles through shots, adjusting for subtle changes, barely visible snow devils, the way flags on distant antenna masts twitch. A small crowd gathers behind her. One of the younger soldiers whispers, "She's better than her sister on this line." Another snorts. "Yeah, but you can't strap confidence to a rifle." Nova's the one who actually performs when it counts. Mara hears them and feels the words settle like ice along her spine. She focuses on the next shot, on the math of it, the feel. The round hits the 800-meter plate with a clear ring. She stops there. The next target, at 900, waits untouched, as if she's unwilling to step past a line only she can see. Later, loading vehicles, she's the one hauling boxes and checking straps while the others laugh and swap stories. As she tosses a tarp over the mobile intel case, a bulky, reinforced box bristling with hard points, something glints on the slope above the base. Mara squints. The slope is a wide sheet of snow, broken only by a few rocks. But beneath the glare, she sees something that doesn't quite belong, a faint line zigzagging across the surface, too straight to be natural, and a tiny, repeated spark like light-off glass. "Hey," she calls to the nearest soldier. "You see that? Up there, left of the radio mast." He follows her gaze, narrows his eyes, then shrugs. "Just wind patterns. Sun's weird today. It's clean," she says. "Too clean. Like a climb route. And that glint. You've been staring at snow too long," he jokes. "You'll start seeing ghosts." Her concern lands nowhere. There's too much to do, too many straps to tighten, radios to check. Inside the comms tent, a radio tech slaps the side of his long-range unit, frowning. "Getting intermittent interference on the net," he mutters. "Probably the mountains acting up." He makes a note and moves on. As they mount up, Nova slings her rifle and walks to Mara's truck. "I'll be up there," she says, tilting her head toward the ridges. "Same as always. You just keep them moving. Don't let the brass slow you down." Mara nods, fingers brushing the small token hanging inside her jacket, a rusted dog tag from that old mission, worn smooth from being turned over and over in her hand. She never talks about it, but she carries it everywhere. The convoy rolls out, engines growling against the silence of the snowfield. Behind them, the base shrinks into a cluster of tents and antennae. Lower in the valley, a civilian snowcat trundles along a side route, its driver bundled in heavy gear. The vehicle's paint is faded, unremarkable. As it passes beneath the convoy's road, the driver lifts a gloved hand in a friendly wave. In the shadow of its cargo tarp, antenna tips and a small dish lie folded, hidden from casual sight. From above, an unseen I could trace both paths, the convoy climbing toward the high country, and the snowcat drifting along a lower contour until the two routes bend toward the same narrow valley. On the map, zoomed out, the valley looks like a rifle barrel. Long, straight, the ridges curling over it like the lips of a muzzle. The convoy drives straight into it. By midday, the sky is harsher. Light bounces off every surface, flattening the world into white glare and dark shadow. The convoy grinds to a halt at the designated patrol base site, engines ticking as they cool. Soldiers spill out, fanning across the valley floor with well-practiced motion, securing perimeters, setting up a small perimeter around the trucks. The mobile intel case is offloaded and set beside a mound of bright orange gear sacks. Halfway up the ridge, Nova and her spotter, Ruiz, pick their way along a contour path, snow crunching softly under their boots. The climb isn't extreme, but the altitude makes every step a little heavier. Nice day to go save people who don't appreciate us, Ruiz says between breaths. They appreciate us, Nova says. They just don't know it until we kill the first idiot who exposes himself. She settles into her nest, a shallow scrape behind a rock, with just enough elevation to look down into the valley. Below, the convoy looks small like toys. She can see Mara moving between vehicles, directing pallets, head bent as if she's counting details no one else notices. Ruiz glassed the upper ridges. All quiet, he says. Just wind and snow. The wind whispers over the rocks, carrying the faint, metallic scent of impending weather. In the valley, Mara feels uneasy. The place is too symmetrical. The ridges flank them in a way that doesn't feel natural, sloping just so, the angle's almost deliberate. With the intel case sitting like a bright tooth in the snow, the whole position feels exposed. She forces herself to focus on tasks. Check radio batteries. Mark casualty collection points. Confirm smoke grenade distribution. It's the kind of work she's good at, seeing the gaps before they get people killed. Down the valley, someone laughs at a joke. It feels too loud. Then, high above Nova's position, something moves. Ruiz frowns. Did you see? The world explodes. Rounds slam into the ridge from higher up, the sound arriving a fraction of a second after impact. Stone splinters. One bullet smashes into the rock just in front of Nova's rifle, showering her with chips. Contact above. Ruiz shouts, diving sideways. Nova tries to roll with him, but a round punches into her leg, just above the knee. She feels the impact more than the pain at first. A brutal, blunt hammer that jerks her sideways. Another hits her plate, driving the air from her lungs. She tumbles behind the rock, rifle skidding away down a short incline, coming to rest just out of reach. Below, at almost the same instant, mortars fall. The first impact takes a bite out of the snow 50 meters from the nearest truck, sending up a plume. The next lands closer, the blast wave slamming Mara backward into the side of the vehicle. Shouts explode into the air, overlapping and panicked. "Take cover," someone yells. "Incoming! Incoming!" Mortar after mortar falls, bracketing the patrol base with uncanny accuracy. One lands right beside a vehicle, flipping it onto its side and turning its windows into knives. Soldiers are thrown like rag dolls, their cries swallowed by the thunder. Mara's ears ring. She blinks, trying to clear her vision. The valley she'd been silently judging a moment ago is now a burning geometry of impact craters and shattered gear. She grabs the radio handset clipped to her chest. "Bravo Actual. We're taking indirect from unknown grid," she shouts. "We need counterbattery, air, anything." The long-range net answers only with interference, a rising, grinding whine that drowns out Falcon's voice. In a small shack on a distant spur, unseen from the valley, a jammer hums to life. Its antenna is camouflaged under snow and rock, aimed down into the bowl like a spear of silence. The uniformed man monitoring its display watches the frequencies spike and smiles tightly. In the patrol base, the radio operator rips off his headset, face pale. "Sir, long range is gone," he gasps to Rowe. "I can't hold Falcon. It's all static. They cut us off." On the ridge, Ruiz drags Nova by her plate carrier, straining to pull her back from the exposed edge. Blood leaks through the fabric at her thigh and side, staining the snow a shocking, bright red. "Stay with me," he pants. "Stay with me, Nova." "I'm good," she lies, voice slurred. She peers up over the rock, trying to glimpse where the fire is coming from. But all she sees is sky and the suggestion of a darker shape higher up. "Call it in," she wheezes. Tell Mara." She doesn't finish. In the valley, intersecting arcs of machine gun fire rake the ground. On both ridges high above, enemy teams have dug in. Their guns cover almost the entire valley floor. Only a few pockets of defilade, old terrace walls, scattered rock outcrops, offer any kind of shelter. Get to cover. Row bellows. Find dead ground, move. But every attempt to move is punished. A team tries to sprint toward a low bank of snow and is pinned in seconds, bullets stitching the ground around their boots. Near the flipped truck, the mobile intel case has been thrown from its straps. It lies half buried in churned snow, its dull metal sides scuffed but intact. No one has the spare capacity to retrieve it. Mara sees it and feels her stomach drop. That box is everything the commander talked about. Sensor maps, encryption cores, all the tech that keeps their border from going blind. If it's destroyed, months of work vanish. If it's taken, "Sergeant," a private screams. They're moving on the left. Through drifting smoke, Mara glimpses figures in white camouflage sliding along the valley's dead ground, working their way toward the intel case. They stay low, heads down, moving with a confidence that says they know exactly where the platoon's arcs of fire start and stop. They rehearse this, she thinks, cold sliding through her despite the exertion. This valley isn't an accident. "Give me smoke," a medic yells nearby. He's crouched behind a shattered vehicle, hands buried in a wounded soldier's chest. "I can't move any of these guys without getting them killed." Mara sprints, staying low, grabbing spare grenades from anyone who has them. Another mortar lands, blowing the side off one of the supply pallets, scattering rations and bandages like confetti. "Short range is good," the radio operator calls. "Local net only." Mara doesn't hesitate. She climbs. The casualty collection point is tucked into a depression halfway between the patrol base and the ridge, a place pre-selected in case of the worst. Now it's a churned patch of snow stained red, bodies laid out in rows. Medics working whoever still has breath. Nova lies near the edge, propped against a pack. Her face is waxy, lips blue at the corners. A medic is wrapping a pressure bandage around her thigh, his gloved hands slick. "Mara," Nova says when she sees her, voice thin. Mara drops to her knees beside her, heart punching against her ribs. "They hit your ridge," she says, stupidly stating the obvious. "Yeah," Nova chuckles weakly. "Guess I wasn't the only one who can read a map." Her eyes flicker downward, toward where her rifle should be. It isn't there. A few meters away, half buried in snow and dirt, lies a familiar shape, stock and barrel, scope glinting faintly under grime. "I can't get back up," Nova says. "Legs useless. Side feels like someone parked a truck on it." "You need medevac," Mara says. "Can't get a bird in with that jammer up." Nova's eyelids flutter. "And those guns, they cut you to ribbons if you move in the open. You need overwatch." "We don't have overwatch," Mara says, throat tightening. Nova stares at her for a long moment. Then she grabs the front of Mara's jacket with surprising force and yanks her closer. "Yes, you do," she rasps. We talked about this, remember? Next time you take the shot." Mara shakes her head automatically. "I'm logistics. They won't." "I am Vega Two," Nova says. "And I'm saying you're Vega Two now." She fumbles with the straps of her plate carrier, forcing it off. Every movement makes her wince, but she refuses to stop until she's peeled the gear halfway down and shoved it at Mara. "Take it," she insists. "Take the rifle. Take the net. You know those ridges as well as I do. Better, probably. You saw this valley before anyone else did." Mara's hands hover over the gear, fingers shaking. Her mind flashes back. Another mountain, another position, a rifle in her hands while men scream for help over the radio. Her finger had frozen on the trigger then, waiting for some hypothetical perfect confirmation, and by the time she fired, it had been too late. I froze, she whispers. Last time I... Then don't freeze now, Nova cuts in. You think I don't carry ghosts? I've just got good at talking louder than they do. She coughs, red flecking her lips. I owe them, Nova murmurs, eyes unfocused for a moment, seeing some other valley. From back then. The ones we lost because you hesitated and I didn't push you hard enough. I owe them a better ending than this. Her fingers tighten in Mara's sleeve. You can give it to them. Around them, mortars continue to fall, the impacts creeping closer to the casualty point. Enemy gunfire has shifted, laying down suppressive curtains whenever anyone tries to move the wounded farther back. A medic leans in. We've got to get her behind more cover, he urges Mara. And you need to get back to your trucks, specialist. We need your head down, not up on some ridge, playing hero. Mara looks at her sister, at the bandages, the blood soaking through, at the way Nova's chest rises shallower each breath. She looks down toward the valley, at the shattered vehicles and scattered soldiers, at the glint of the intel case half buried in dirty snow, and the enemy shapes creeping closer to it. Without overwatch, they're all already dead. They just haven't finished falling yet. Mara reaches out and picks up the rifle. It feels both familiar and wrong in her hands, heavier than on the range, as if it knows what's at stake. She shrugs into Nova's plate carrier, adjusting the straps as best she can. It sits slightly off-center on her frame. The radio handset attached to the sniper neck crackles as she plugs it into her headset. The channel that used to carry Nova's easy drawl now waits, silent. Mara, Nova whispers, catching her wrist one last time. Take the shot this time. Don't wait for the fear to go away. It never does. Mara nods, swallowing hard. She turns away before she can change her mind and starts up the slope. The air thins quickly, each step sinking into snow that's been packed by wind and time. The sun burns off the last of her hesitation, leaving only the cold calculus of angles and distance. Below, mortars continue to pummel the valley. The enemy squad is closer to the intel case with every passing minute. Every footfall is a race against time, against the slow, inexorable closure of the valley's jaws. Behind her, the medics drag Nova deeper into the casualty point. Ahead of her, the ridge rises like a white blade, cutting into the sky. She keeps climbing. From halfway up, the valley looks different. Mara pauses, leaning into a jut of rock, breathing hard. The patrol base below is a swirl of smoke and tiny moving dots. The mortars are still falling, but she can see the pattern now, the way the impacts walk in a methodical grid, tightening around the trucks and the intel case like a noose. She closes her eyes and replays the map from the briefing in her head. The contour lines, the ridges, the way the valley funnels into the narrow throat where they're pinned. The standard approach Nova took that morning, cutting along a mid-level contour, settling into a known overwatch point, had seemed solid at the time. Textbook. Predictable. Predictable is exactly the problem. Mara scans the ridges above and to the side, searching for alternatives. The wind whips at her hood, tugging at loose straps. To her right, she spots it. A steep gully cutting straight up the face, half hidden in shadow. Snow has drifted into it, creating uneven steps between exposed rocks. To most, it would look like a bad idea, too steep, too risky, with too much chance of triggering an avalanche. But she sees something else. The wind patterns on the surface aren't random. The way the snow has slumped against certain rocks, the feathered edges near others, the faint lines running across the face, they all tell a story. Someone else has been here. Okay, she mutters to herself. You want it next time? This is it. She angles toward the gully. The snow changes under her boots as she enters it, from crusty to softer, then back again. Here and there, she sees the remains of old boot prints, nearly erased by fresh fall, but still visible if you know what to look for. A slightly deeper depression, a tiny collapse of a crust where a heel once hit. Metal teeth have scraped at the rock in a few places, cramping marks. Not from her unit. They haven't climbed this face yet. The enemy did. They reconned this, she whispers, anger pricking through her fear. Mapped every approach they thought we'd use. Her fingers brush against a patch where the snow looks subtly wrong, darker, denser, as if it's been melted and refrozen more recently. Body heat stays in the snow longer than people think. It leaves fingerprints if you know where to look. She stops to steady herself on a narrow ledge. The drop below her is enough to ruin a body, not that she plans on testing it. Her heart hammers in her chest, not just from exertion, but from the vertigo of what she's attempting. The ridge above her feels almost close enough to touch. If she reaches the top, she'll have a line of sight over the enemy's positions that even Nova never had. She'll have angles they didn't account for. If she falls, she'll just be another red stain on the snow, one more ghost to add to the collection. Her rangefinder dangles from its clip. She grabs it and points it up toward an outcropping she guesses might be near where the enemy sniper is set. The display flickers, then dies. She hits it with the heel of her hand. Nothing. The cold, the altitude, it's drained the battery faster than it should have. Of course, she mutters. Of course you picked today. No precise ranges now. No numbers to lean on. Just the feel of the terrain, her mental map, and the memories of every time she's walked the sim of this valley back at base. Below, Rose's voice barks over the net, frayed and taut. Bravo actual to anyone still listening. We're running out of smoke and grenades. Ammunition's low. We can't move the wounded without losing half of them. Higher command tries to answer. Voices chopped into unintelligible fragments by the jammer. Mara hears only pieces, hold your, and no authorization to break. She grits her teeth. They'd tell her to come back if they knew where she was. To stay in her lane. To keep counting boxes and bandages while the valley closes around them. She turns the volume on the long-range net down and focuses on the local channel, where voices are real and rough and scared. Another gust of wind slams into her as she crawls onto a narrow spine of rock. Snow swirls around her, suddenly thicker, visibility dropping as a fast-moving squall sweeps in. The mountains vanish into a gray haze. For a terrifying second, she sees nothing but white. No valley, no ridge, no sky. Just a blank, swirling void. Perfect timing, she gasps, pressing herself flat as the wind threatens to peel her off the spine. The squall howls over the ridgeline, muffling the distant pops and booms of the battle below. Sound becomes strange, muted in some directions, amplified in others. It's disorienting, but it's also a gift. No one expects a climber in weather like this. The enemy will be tucked deeper into their nests, shields up against the wind, assuming the terrain itself is now on their side. Mara uses it. She moves in short bursts, crawling from rock to rock, feeling for solid ground with gloved hands before committing her weight. The snow stings her face, clinging to her lashes. Her fingers are numb, but her mind is sharp, running calculations as she goes. The squall begins to thin as she reaches the top. The ridge edge appears out of the haze like the lip of a precipice. She pulls herself up onto a narrow shelf and freezes. There, carved into the rock itself and dusted with fresh snow, is a small hollow, a firing position carefully cut and shaped. Abandoned now, its previous occupant having moved or been redeployed moments before the storm hit. She crawls into it, heart pounding. From this position, the view is staggering. The valley below stretches in full, brutal clarity. She can see the flipped truck, the scattered soldiers, the plumes from mortar impacts. She can also see higher up the opposite ridge, where shapes in white crouch behind emplacements, feeding ammunition into the guns, tearing her platoon apart. To her right, a spur juts out, and atop it, something inconspicuous breaks the snow line. A bulge the same color as the rock, with a faint antenna tip poking out. The jammer. She lies half exposed over a steep drop, the rock beneath her narrow and unforgiving. There's no room to shift much. Every movement has to be careful, measured. She lays the rifle out ahead of her, tucks the butt into her shoulder, and peers through the optic. The glass shows her a world of crisp detail, edges, shadows, the faint shimmer of heat-off machine gun barrels. It also reveals the likely path of the enemy sniper who had been harassing Nova earlier. She sees a faint depression on a nearby outcrop, where someone had lain prone for hours. She counts her magazines. It's not a lot. Enough for maybe a dozen, 15 shots if she's conservative. Maybe fewer, depending on how chaotic this gets. Her target list crystallizes in her mind. Enemy sniper and spotter. Jammer crew. Mortar direction center. Heavy machine gun teams. The assault squad closest to the intel case. If she doesn't miss, and if nothing unexpected breaks the chain, it might be enough. If she hesitates, picks the wrong priority, or loses her nerve, the whole valley goes dark in more ways than one. Below, Nova's voice cracks over the short-range net, thin and distant from her casualty point. "Mara," she whispers. "Take a shot this time." Mara closes her eyes for a moment, letting the guilt and fear and old memories surge up, crest, and break. The snow squall finally dissipates, shredding into high-moving wisps. The valley comes into sharp focus again, as if some curtain has lifted. She opens her eyes and settles behind the scope. Her voice, when she keys the mic, is quieter than Nova's usual tone. Slower, but there's iron under it. "Bravo Actual, this is Vega Two," she says. Rose's reply is instant, disbelieving and desperate. "Vega Two? They said you were hit." "Don't worry about that," she says. "You're in a bad geometry down there. I'm about to change it. On my shot, you move exactly when I tell you to. No earlier." Silence hangs on the net for a heartbeat. Then, "Copy, Vega 2, Rose says. "We're with you." Mara takes one more look at her low magazine stack, at the valley full of people who have no idea the quiet logistics specialist is about to decide whether they live or die. She steadies her breathing, feels the rifle settle into the pocket of her shoulder, and lines up her first shot on a faint glimmer of glass on a nearby outcrop. The shot that will start turning the kill box inside out. Mara's world narrows to the circle of her scope. First priority, the enemy sniper who pinned Nova to the ridge. If she doesn't take that out, she'll be playing a duel she doesn't have time for. The glimmer she spotted earlier is barely visible now, just a slight distortion in the light where a scope's lens catches reflections. She shifts her reticle just off the bright point, imagines the enemy's face behind it, and waits for the brief lull between gusts. Her breathing slows. The battle noise below becomes distant, background texture. She squeezes. The rifle bucks against her shoulder. Through the scope, she sees a white-hooded figure jerk backward violently, the scope bouncing away from his face. A second figure beside him, the spotter, half rises in surprise. Mara works the bolt instinctively and sends another round before he can even register what's happening. The second body collapses across the first. "Enemy sniper down," she murmurs, but doesn't waste time announcing it on the net. Next priority, the jammer. She swings the rifle to the right, toward the camouflaged bulge on the spur. Up close, the shape resolves into a covered mount, cables running from it into a snowberry box. A man crouches beside it, head bent over a display. She doesn't aim at him. Instead, she aims at the box. Armor plating will shrug off glancing hits, but connections and control units tend to be softer. She finds the point where cable meets housing, imagines the path of the bullet through plastic and metal and tiny, delicate components. Another breath, another squeeze. The bullet slams into the junction. For a moment, nothing happens. Then the box sparks. The man flinches away, hands up as a brief flare of light, and smoke bursts from the housing. The antenna wobbles and then droops. In the patrol base, the radio operator jerks as his headset suddenly fills with coherent sound. "Bravo Actual, this is Falcon. Say status." "We lost you for." Ro almost drops his mic. "Falcon, this is Bravo Actual. We are in heavy contact and taking sustained indirect and machine gun fire from both ridges. One vehicle flipped, multiple wounded. We have overwatch now. Request immediate fires and prep for evac." "Copy, Bravo Actual. We've got you now. Sit tight. We're working." Mara doesn't listen to the rest. Long-range support will take time. She has seconds. On a ridge above the mortar pit, she sees movement. Men scrambling as they realize their comms have hiccuped, their once perfect grid pattern of impacts now thrown into doubt. Her eyes track the path of the last mortar shell, the arc it carved through the air. She traces it backward and finds a huddle of figures around a field table, one of them pointing, another on a radio handset. Fire Direction Center. She shifts. The first shot takes the pointing man in the shoulder, spinning him. The second shot punches into the chest of the one with the radio handset. The others dive for cover, confusion rippling through the team. Mortar fire stutters, then goes wild. Rounds landing too short, too long, one even detonating halfway up a ridge in a shower of snow and rock. A minute later, it ceases entirely as whoever's left decides they can't adjust safely without their lead. Down below, soldiers look up from their positions as the rhythm of impacts suddenly stops. "What did you do?" Ro demands on the net. "Don't worry about it," Mara says. "You're not being bracketed anymore, but you're still in a bad spot. Hold one." The enemy responds fast. On a cutout near the mortar pit, a small craft lifts off. A drone, its rotors buzzing as it climbs, turning in slow circles as it searches for the source of the sudden chaos. Its body glints in the sun as it arcs toward Mara's ridgeline. She watches it through her scope, feeling a chill that has nothing to do with the temperature. That drone isn't just for spotting. It's a pointer. Once it finds her, they'll bring everything they have to bear. She can't outrun it. She can only outthink it. She shifts her focus for a moment from targets to her surroundings, scanning for anything reflective. The squall earlier left a crust of ice on some rocks. One patch, just ahead of her, catches the sun at a sharp angle, throwing a thin, bright line of glare. She slides backward a few inches, aligning herself so that from above, her position lies directly in that line of reflection. The glare will smear out her outline, make it harder for an overhead sensor to detect her exact shape. It's not perfect, but it's something. The drone buzzes overhead, its shadow flickering across the snow near her. Through the scope, she sees it pause, hover, rotate as its camera sweeps. For a few endless seconds, it feels like a single, unblinking eye staring straight through every layer of her. Then it moves on, drifting further down the ridge in search of easier prey. She exhales slowly. "Bravo Actual," she says. "I'm going to start taking apart their heavy guns. You'll know when it's time to move. Have your teams ready." "Copy," Rose says. "We're readjusting." She turns her attention to the heavy machine guns. The right side nest is dug into a notch in the rock, its barrel glowing faintly. The gunner is hunched, eyes behind iron sights, while his assistant feeds rounds. The rest of the team stays low, trusting their position and firepower. Mara angles her shot slightly off-center. Shooting the gunner through the chest is one solution, but if she hits the weapon itself, a tripod leg, the mount, she can force them into a scramble. Her round hits the junction where the gun mounts to the tripod. Metal shatters. The heavy weapon lurches sideways, almost tearing from its base. The gunner hollers and tries to correct it. The assistant scrambles, exposing his shoulder and helmet. He drops a second later. On the left ridge, another gun begins to traverse toward the valley below, trying to cover the gap. Mara is already shifting. She tags the gunner through the faceplate as he peeks over his parapet, then drills his assistant as he reaches for the grips. Down in the valley, Ro feels the pressure ease. "Now," Mara snaps. 2 trees, low wall move. He doesn't hesitate. "First squad, smoke out," he yells. "Move your wounded on my mark." Grenades arc through the air, popping into thick plumes that billow and drift. For a brief moment, the valley floor becomes a shifting maze of gray and white. Under its cover, soldiers grab stretchers, sling arms over shoulders, and sprint. Mara tracks them through the scope, making slight adjustments to her target list. When she sees an enemy squad trying to shift to a better angle on the moving figures, she prioritizes their team leader, one shot, and then their radio man, another. Leaderless, they hesitate, their fire uncoordinated and wild. Her magazine runs dry. She swaps it mechanically, fingers slick with sweat inside her gloves. Below, a small team peels off toward the intel case, staying low and tight. She knows what she has to do. Those soldiers are exposed. The enemy squad approaching the case is close. She splits the difference. Her shot takes the lead enemy fighter through the neck, dropping him into the snow. Two others flinch and duck into a shallow dip, temporarily out of line of sight. It buys her platoon's intel team 5 precious seconds, enough time for them to slide in, grab the case by its handles, and drag it toward the 3-tree cover sheet identified earlier. Got your toy? One of them grunts over the net. It's heavier than it looks. Just keep it close and keep it moving, Mara replies. They want that more than they want you. On the enemy's side, the commander finally moves. He's easy to spot once you know what to look for. The way fighters glance toward him for direction, the way he stands slightly taller, scanning the field rather than fixating on any one target. He's wrapped in white like the rest, but his smock is cleaner, his posture sharper. He strides forward with a small reserve, aiming directly for the path between the intel case and the squad carrying it. Even from this distance, Mara can sense the narrative he's chasing. Seize the case, cripple the enemy's eyes and ears, and send footage of the prize back across the border. A victory not just on the map, but on whatever screens his bosses care about. She centers her reticle on him. This shot feels heavier than the rest, though the round weighs the same. It's not just another target. It's a hinge. Wind. Distance. Slight uphill angle. She runs the numbers as naturally as breathing, but something else is there now, too. The memory of that earlier failure. The way she'd let fear stall her at a crucial moment. Nova's voice echoes faintly in her ear. You don't wait for perfect. You don't wait for permission. Mara breathes in, breathes out, half presses, then commits. The commander is mid-gesture, arm outstretched, pointing directly toward the intel case when the bullet reaches him. He crumples as if the strings holding him up have been cut. The fighters around him recoil, some dropping to their knees automatically, others freezing in place. Cohesion shatters. Without his direction, the enemy force fractures into pockets. Some squads keep pushing forward, others start to fall back, others simply cling to cover and fire erratically at anything that moves. Road doesn't waste the opportunity. Push to phase line Bravo, he bellows. Bound by teams. We're moving to the extract LZ. Keep that intel case and our wounded in the center. The platoon begins to move in practice bounds, squads leapfrogging each other from cover to cover, the valley finally offering them a path that doesn't end in certain death. Mara continues to sculpt that path. A heavy weapon, hastily remounted on a snowbank, starts spraying rounds toward a group of wounded being dragged through the snow. She swings, heart pounding. Her first shot takes out the gunner's shoulder, spinning him. The second rips into the tripod, collapsing it. The third punches the barrel itself, bending it enough that when someone tries to fire, the weapon jams. Her last full magazine feels light when she slaps it in. Above her, the drone returns. It's been circling, learning the shape of the valley's changing fight. Now, with their commander down and critical systems compromised, whoever's running it decides their only option is to silence the sniper, tearing their plan apart. The drone hovers high, then angles, vectoring fire from a distant ridge. A thin, irregular pattern of small-caliber rounds begins to walk toward Mara's position. Snow jumps in tiny spurts around her, pebbles of rock spattering her cheek. She flattens out, trying to make herself as small as possible. The rifle lies against the rock, her cheek pressed to the stock. A round hits a rock just in front of her scope. Shards blast outward, spiderwebbing the optics glass. She curses, blinking away the sting as tiny splinters cut her skin. Her eye behind the scope now sees the world through cracks and distortion, lines running through the reticle, edges warped. Vega 2, you still with us? Ro demands, urgent. I'm here, she says, voice now edged with strain. Scope's not pretty, but it works. Falcon's got birds inbound, he says. We're almost at the LZ, but we've got a 50-meter stretch of open snow between us and the extraction point. No cover. If we go now, they'll scythe us down. Mara thinks fast. She can't see cleanly anymore. The cracks in the glass make precise aiming a nightmare. But she doesn't need perfect hits. She needs to shape behavior, make the enemy duck when her people run. On my mark, you run that gap, she says. I'm going to make them keep their heads down. Don't stop. Don't look back. What about you? Someone asks, breathless. Not relevant, she replies, and means it. She shifts her focus from hitting individuals to hitting the spaces around them. She fires into parapets, into the edges of cover, into any spot where she sees the suggestion of movement. Even through the battered scope, she can still read the valley's contours, the way snow curves around obstacles, the faint discolorations where boots have churned tracks. Her rounds don't all find flesh. They don't have to. They hack at confidence, at the fragile willingness to peek over a barrier when bullets are already sparking off its top. Now she hisses. In the valley, Row roars and the platoon surges. Wounded or hauled, slung, carried. The intel case is gripped by two soldiers who look like they'd rather be holding anything else, but they don't let go. Feet pound over snow that looks flat but hides the pockmarks of earlier impacts. Machine guns try to answer. Some spit wildly, their gunners flinching as rounds smack into their emplacements. Others stay silent as crews hug the ground, unsure where exactly the death from above will strike next. Mara's shoulder throbs with every shot. Her cheek is numb where it presses into the stock. Her fingers are stiff, fumbling at the bolt. The drone's guided fire creeps closer. One round clips her plate carrier, jarring her. Another slams into the rock inches from her head, sending a hot shard of stone into her temple. Her vision swims for a heartbeat. "Come on," she whispers to herself. "Just a little more." She fires the last round in her magazine at a muzzle flash that's been particularly persistent. She doesn't see the impact, but the stream of tracers from that position stops. Her rifle clicks on an empty chamber. Below, the last of the platoon crosses the open stretch and collapses behind the shallow berm that marks their extraction line. Flares pop, colored smoke marking the landing zone. Mara lies still, chest heaving, the cracked scope inches from her eye. On the net, voices are shouting about incoming aircraft, about holding the perimeter, about casualty counts. Rowe is asking for Vega Two, for confirmation that she's okay, that she made it. Mara keys her mic, but no words come out. Her throat is too tight, and the world is starting to tilt gently sideways. She drags herself back from the ridge edge, away from the shattered firing position. Snow crunches under her gear. Her left arm doesn't seem to be working quite right. She realizes in a distant sort of way that she's been hit by shrapnel at some point. Her sleeve is torn, blood soaking through the fabric, the cold keeping the pain at bay. The drone buzz grows faint as it moves elsewhere, the remote gunfire tapering off. Mara rolls onto her back and stares up at the sky. It's the same hard blue it was this morning, uncaring, stretching forever over worse things than this valley. She hears her own ragged breathing in her ears, mixed with the clipped voices on the net. Then, finally, darkness creeps in from the edges of her vision, and she lets it. The sound that pulls her back is rotors. When Mara opens her eyes, she's on a stretcher near the extraction line. Snow whips around in the downwash of a transport helicopter setting down nearby. Its engine's a roaring presence that fills her chest. Medics move between rows of injured, their motions efficient but frayed at the edges. Some of the wounded are conscious, eyes wide and dazed. Others are mercifully still. Nova lies on the next stretcher over, more bandaged than person, but her chest rises and falls. A medic adjusts and 4-line above her, nodding to himself. "Where's the intel?" Someone shouts over the noise. "Here," a soldier answers, thumping the scarred mobile case at his feet. Duct tape crisscrosses its surface where shrapnel tried and failed to crack it open. The casing is pitted, burned in spots, but the locks are intact. Rowe limps past, using his rifle as a cane. He looks down at Mara, then at Nova, and something like understanding moves behind his eyes. "Vega Two," he says, voice hoarse. "Good work." Mara opens her mouth to correct him, to say you've got the wrong sister, but the words tangle. The medic leans in and pushes her stretcher toward the helicopter. "Plenty of time for that later, Sergeant," he says. She's not sure who he's addressing. "Right now, we're just getting you out." The world becomes a blur of metal and noise and vibration as they lift away from the valley. Through the open door, Mara glimpses the terrain below, the kill box that try to swallow them. From up here, she can see the faint imprints of dug-in positions on the ridges, the subtle lines of approach routes carved into the snow. The shape of the battle is laid out like a diagram in a textbook. She also sees the scorch marks where her rounds and mortar fragments hit, the shattered remnants of the jammer, the still forms of enemy fighters who'd thought they owned the geometry of this place. In the operations tent later, the air is warmer but no less tense. Maps and satellite images cover the table. An intelligence officer stands at the front, gestures to a spread of captured items. Enemy maps, encrypted radios, a rugged tablet pulled from one of the dead. Based on what we pulled off their bodies and out of their devices, he says, pointing to a detailed overlay of the region, their primary objective was this. He taps an icon representing the mobile intel package. If they captured it intact, they'd have had access to sensor placement, coverage gaps, and encryption keys. Best case, we'd spend months blind while we rebuilt the network. Worst case, they'd use our own data to slip forces across the line without us seeing them until it's too late. He looks up at the commander. They were set up for propaganda win too, he adds. Drone footage, multiple angles. That valley was supposed to be their stage, a boxed-in formation of our guys, cut to pieces, then the big reveal of them walking off with our tech. The commander's jaw clenches. And instead, he says, they lost their overwatch, their mortar team, their jammer, their commander, and most of their assault force. Our people came home with a package. The intel officer nods toward the big screen, where drone footage now plays. From above, the battle looks almost unreal. A choreography of explosions, tiny figures, muzzle flashes. But one thing stands out, the pattern of the shots that systematically dismantled the enemy. Slow down, it's more obvious. First, the enemy sniper, then the jammer, then the mortar leaders, then heavy guns, then squad leaders and radio operators. The invisible hand shaping it all. That's not luck, the intel officer says quietly. That's someone who understood the geometry better than they did. The commander looks down at a report on the table, at a name tape. Vega Two. She's still in surgery? He asks. Nova is, the medical liaison replies. She'll live, but she's off operational status for months. Then who the hell was on the rifle? The commander asks. There's a knock at the tent's entrance. Mara steps in, moving carefully, bandage wrapping one arm, a brace under her uniform on her shoulder. She wears a plate carrier that doesn't quite fit, patched and stained. The name tape on the chest is Nova's, not hers. Sir, she says, standing straighter than she feels. You wanted to see Vega Two. The commander studies her for a long moment. We're looking for the sniper who took apart an entire assault from an unplanned position under jam conditions, he says. As far as I recall, you're assigned to logistics. Yes, sir, she says. Usually, she draws in a steadying breath. But when Nova went down, someone had to take her place. He gestures to the chair across from him. Sit, he says. Over the next hour, Mara walks them through it. She explains the gully she chose instead of the obvious contour, how she saw the old cramping marks, the way the snow had slumped where bodies had lain, how the wind patterns revealed more than they hid. She describes spotting the faint glint of the enemy's scope, the bulge that could only be a jammer, the subtle differences in how snow built up around a mortar pit's sheltered edge. She sketches angles in the air with her fingers, tracing how the valley's shape created blind zones and funnels. She connects each critical shot not just to impulse, but to specific details, a slightly darker patch of snow, a line that was too straight, a shadow that didn't match its neighboring contours. The intel officer listens with increasing focus. So, when you hit the control unit on the jammer, he says, you weren't just taking a shot at the box. You were aiming for the cable junction because you knew that was the system's vulnerability. Yes, sir, Mara says. It's on our own gear, too. Covering those is harder when you're trying to hide everything else. The commander flips through a thin folder on the table. A report from a mission months ago sits inside. A mission where another unit walked into an ambush, where a backup overwatch position failed to fire in time. This isn't the first time you've been in position with a rifle, he says, eyes on the page. Back then, you froze. Cost a squad dearly. Mara doesn't look away. Yes, sir, she says. I waited for certainty that never came. I thought if I fired and was wrong, I'd kill the wrong people. So I hesitated. By the time I acted, half of them were already down. The memory is a weight she's carried for so long it feels like part of her bones. What was different this time? He asks. Nothing, she says. Everything. She searches for the right words. I was still scared, she continues. I still wanted someone else to make the call. But there wasn't anyone left who could see what I was seeing. So I decided fear didn't get a vote anymore. It could ride along, but it didn't get to put its hands on the rifle. Silence hangs for a beat. The commander closes the folder. Your actions today, he says, saved a platoon, preserved critical intel, and prevented our defenses from being stripped bare. You also broke several layers of protocol and stepped outside your assigned billet. Yes, sir, Mara says. I did. He studies her for another long moment. Sometimes protocol is a map, he says. Sometimes it's a wall. The hard part is knowing what you're looking at. He nods slightly. We'll deal with the paperwork. For now, rest. Medical, then time with your sister. After that, he glances at the drone footage frozen on the screen, at the pattern of shots that tore the enemy's plan apart. We'll discuss where Vega Two actually belongs on our roster. In the recovery ward, the hum of machines replaces the shriek of wind. Nova lies propped up on a bed, pale but awake. Tubes snake from her arms. Monitors beep quietly at her side. Mara sits on a chair nearby, one arm in a sling, the other resting on the bed rail. So, Nova croaks, voice rough. They tell me some ghost took over my net and turned that valley into a meat grinder. Mara huffs a tired laugh. Must have been nice to listen, she says. She sounded very professional. Nova's gaze softens as she reaches out, until her fingers find Mara's. I heard some of it, she says. Local net bled into the med channel a few times. I remember thinking, that doesn't sound like me. Took me a minute to realize that was the point. I didn't have a choice, Mara says quietly. You did Nova counters. You always do. You just picked the hard one this time. They sit in silence for a while, listening to the distant creak of the ward, the occasional call over the hospital PA. You know, Nova says eventually, they'll probably make a big deal about this. Medals. Commendations. PowerPoints with red circles around your shots. Mara grimaces. Great. Nova squeezes her hand. Just remember one thing, she says. You didn't do it to be a legend. You did it so those kids down there get to grow old enough to complain about knee pain. That's the only part that matters. Weeks later, the mountains are quieter again. On a training range not far from the base, targets stand against snowbanks, their surfaces scarred from countless rounds. The air is cold but calm, the sky washed clean by recent storms. Mara lies prone behind her rifle, not Nova's now, but one matched to her and marked with her own name. A small group of younger soldiers sprawls around her, watching, rifles at their sides. Wind's light from your right, she tells them. Not enough to scare you, just enough to nudge you. Don't ignore it. Respect it. She has them call their shots before they fire, forcing them to articulate their reasoning. Distance, angle, wind, inclination. They stumble at first, but improve. One of them, a fresh-faced private, hesitates for a long time on the trigger. His brow furrows. He lifts his head and looks back at her. How do you know, he asks, when to stop thinking and just shoot? I mean, I get afraid I'll mess it up. I'll take the shot, and it'll be wrong. Mara looks past him for a moment, toward the mountains beyond the range, the same spine of peaks that held the valley, the ridges, the kill box that try to swallow them. She thinks of old ghosts and new scars, of the way her hands shook on that ridge, of her sister's fading voice in her ear. She thinks of the soldiers now griping about guard duty instead of lying still under snow. You don't wait to stop being afraid, she tells him. You just decide what matters more. She lets that sit for a heartbeat, then adds, you don't have to be fearless to turn a battlefield into hell for the people who came to kill your friends. The private watches her, absorbing the words. So what do you have to be? He asks. Mara chambers around, settles her cheek against the stock, and lines up on a distant steel plate. The wind brushes her face, familiar now instead of hostile. You have to stay, she says simply. Stay with the shot. Stay with your people. Stay in the fight long enough to make your fear earn its keep. She squeezes the trigger. Far downrange, the plate rings. A clear, clean sound that echoes back over the snow, thin but undeniable. The students grin and start getting into position, copying her posture, adjusting their own sights. Above them, the sky remains cold and indifferent. The mountains are the same hard shapes they've always been. But somewhere out there, on a ridge where the wind still whispers over old positions and faint depressions in the snow, the story has changed just a little, etched not into stone, but into the choices of those who'll climb it next.